Take all, last game of the year, Dan. Can't hold anything back now. Hashtag Waterboy reference to start a chess video. And this, my friends, is what happened. Started with e4, and after knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, we get our, I believe, third, maybe fourth Berlin of the match. There haven't been too many Berlins, but there's been a lot of Ruy Lopez, in case you've been under a rock and not paying attention. And now, rather than taking the 4d3 approach, which was played by Magnus in the game that he eventually went on to win, though it wasn't necessarily the cleanest victory in Game 10, as we know, Sergey Karjakin really missed his big chances on the f-file, particularly the f2 square. You can back up and check out the Game 10 video. But rather, Magnus decided he would go back to the main line of the Berlin and play castles, which allows knight takes e4. And now, of course, the Berlin endgame, the famous Berlin endgame is reached with d4, knight d6. And after the pieces and then the queens are traded, we get a position that's unbalanced because black has the two bishops and a very open development, but has the doubled pawns and an awkward king, and white has the 4-on-3. This isn't a Berlin endgame video, but that's the main line of the Berlin. Whenever anyone ever says the Berlin endgame, that's what they're talking about. Now you know. You're welcome. But rather, Magnus decided to repeat what he played in Game 3, which is Rook e1. Now, it's not to say that Rook e1 is a bad move, but it doesn't offer the most dynamic fighting chances because the play is even more straightforward than, if you would believe it, an opening that takes the queens off the board before move 10. Obviously, the Berlin endgame is an endgame. As we said, the queens come off the board, but at least in these positions, you have the imbalance that what both sides want is completely different, right? White wants to simplify and use a very healthy pawn majority to just flex his muscles on the king side and just win. Black wants the bishops to stay alive and stay healthy and create a dynamic, very tactical endgame if he could. So the Rook e1 line doesn't go for these types of variations. It instead trades things on the e-file. Of course, you can't take on b5 because you lose immediately to a very obvious discovered check. Pay attention. But after knight takes, bishop e7, the pieces are going to be traded on e5, and then castles, d4, bishop f6. We saw this position in Game 3 when Magnus Carlsen played the very interesting rook to e2. For those of you who don't remember, again, I recommend you back up in this series and check out the analysis to rook e2, where we described some of the small, very subtle things that white is trying to create with this move. And even though Magnus did not go on to win that game, he was close, and it was complicated, but certainly he got more out of the position in a very Magnus style affair, very grinded out, where he was playing for two results kind of position. But today he wasn't even interested in that subtlety. He played the move rook to e1, and if you can't tell from my tone, we're headed toward a game where you are going to be very disappointed. How disappointed you're going to be in today's effort of Game 12, I couldn't even keep you in suspense for more than 5 minutes. You know why? Because this is how we all feel right now, right here. Take a look at this beautiful face. That's how we feel after Game 12. Because these players agreed to a draw pretty much before the game started. What we learned is that Magnus Carlsen really didn't show up with much in his pocket in this game, with a match strategy apparently to take the match to a rapid playoff, which will take place on Wednesday, November 30th. This position is not only has it been played a million times before, but it's exactly the kind of game you play for when it's not even really a play for two results position. It's like play for half of a result. And that's what happens here. So after the move, knight to e8 is played, c3, d5. This is a position that is just super well known in terms of the Berlin. Bishop to d3, and after g6, this position was actually played by Magnus against Vladimir Kramnik in a game that he didn't win. It also went on to be a draw, but at least in that game he had the chance to win and really had some potential pressure that's based on a small move order thing, which will be the one thing you're going to learn from this video. But other than that, what you have here, okay, there are some instructive things. I don't want to disappoint you and have you go away thinking, wow, well, that was lame. Danny's in a bad mood. I am kind of in a bad mood. You know why? Because I was expecting more. I wanted more of a fight. I wanted Magnus to use his opportunity to at least put pressure on the situation, not because I'm rooting for Magnus, but because I'm rooting for a decisive result and a result that keeps people there for more than 35 minutes. And we didn't get that today. So I'm recording this video earlier than usual because of that. And so if you're watching it later, like most people opening up on the eastern side of the planet, you will be disappointed. But I don't want you to miss out on the shared spiritual, mental, emotional, psychological disappointment that we all have about this game. I want you to feel the pain that we all feel. So you're welcome for that. And the thing is, okay, but let's learn something regardless of that. These positions offer the potential for someone to go drastically wrong, even though they are just 100% symmetrical. There's literally not a dynamic difference on the board. Not one side has the bishop pair versus the two knights, so one side wants it open versus closed. Not one side has a double pawn but open lines to show for it. The only difference in the entire game is that white has quick access to the e-file while black doesn't. And that is important because whenever open files in many cases are like commodities, I've said this before, supply and demand. The less there are, the more valuable they are. Do not underestimate the control of critical squares and critical open files, especially when the board is very symmetrical. So that is the one idea white has here. But against any kind of well-prepared opponent, Sergey Karjakin is one, this is just not a real winning try. And that's the honest truth. So here Carlsen plays knight a3, which, okay, it's not knight to d2 as he played against Kramnik and Doha, as I mentioned, but because the knight took a maneuver to the king side and eventually we saw the e-file open up, it's really not that big of a deal, not that big of a difference. There's also variations where the knight will sometimes come to d2 and then in some positions try to go to f1 and into e3, which is also something that could be similar to the knight on a3, since the knight could take a c2 to e3 route, basically just a different road leading to the same destination. So he plays knight a3, which is an official novelty, but after c6 you just knew Karjakin was prepared here, and I'll show you why. The one way this game could go wrong for black, let's say, is with the move knight to g7, and after knight to c2, playing the same sort of idea that Kramnik played against Carlsen before, but after takes f5 and then knight e3, where white pretty much is forcing another trade because this knight's coming into g4 to attack the dark squares. White ends up with the control over the e-file because the difference between this position and the game is that black is unable to challenge the e-file either on e8 or e7 because at the end of the trade, queen e7, for example, takes, this pawn falls, and white's just winning. And so because of that potential pawn falling, black has to be a little careful. The combination of the only pressure that exists in the position, again, there's no dynamic, there's no long-term differences here, only temporary piece placement, activity differences. Because of the threat here and because of the e-file, that is something black has to be a little careful of. So because in that game black played c6, due to the fact that he couldn't trade and lose the c7 pawn, white finally did get control of the e-file. And this did prove to be something that even though white didn't win the game, white went on to be able to push for a long time. Note that a move like king f8 to try to overprotect the e8 square simply doesn't work because there's all kinds of checks at some point on h6. So this would be the one thing where black could go wrong, that white could shoot for, is that basically black tries too aggressively to challenge the minor pieces before solving the potential issue of the c7 pawn being under fire. But the one person who got himself in trouble in that line, and as I said in that game where you saw Carlsen get the e-file against Kramnik, was Karjakin's countryman, and I seriously doubt Karjakin was not going to see that game. So it's not like Magnus Carlsen went into this thinking he was going to improve on his game with Kramnik or any sort of reality there. We're really just talking ourselves blue here because we owe it to you, the fans, to provide analysis. So before you even think about disliking my video, think about the effort that was put on the board here and that I'm trying to give you some educational entertainment to take home, despite what was a completely theoretical, lackluster, I've already decided it was a draw performance, and that's the truth. So he goes knight to c2, but as we said, instead of knight to g7, Karjakin just plays c6. He knows what's coming. He's going to eliminate those tactics. So as I said, Carlsen goes knight c2 anyway. Here comes the idea of trading the piece on f5, and queen d2 really just shows that there's nothing here, because queen d2 is essentially just a loss of tempo. There's not going to be any improvement other than bringing the knight to e3 to trade off this knight the moment the opportunity presents itself. And so part of the reason for that is because if white goes knight e3 now, for example, early to try to prevent the piece from trading on f5, black has this nice move knight to e6. A move like bishop e5 might even run to like a trade and then a queen to g5, where the e-pawn is hanging and the knight's coming into f4. So this is clearly better for black. And if the bishop retreats anywhere else, maybe there's even ideas like the bishop coming into g5 at some point, or maybe the bishop can stay on this diagonal and you can play for c5. The point is, white is closing the e-file and not getting the kind of counterplay immediately you need with the knight coming in, because black is meeting knight e3 with the move knight e6. So if there's no real advantage to moving the knight to a3, c2, e3, or d2, f1, e3, and the only real idea was that you could try to control the e-file before your opponent completed their queenside development, then we see that, okay, so once Karjakin stops those ideas, stops the c6 pawn from being an issue, so that in the game, as you're about to see, he is able to challenge the e-file in exactly the way I highlighted before was not a possibility because of the pawn hanging over here. And then we know this game was just a planned draw by Carlsen. A few moves sort of pretending to make an effort were played further, but the pawns locked themselves up quickly, and the game was just agreed to a draw. So if you're disappointed, know that you are a part of the collective global consciousness on the planet right now regarding how Game 12 went. It's not a you problem, it's a them problem, all right? This is not a you, all right? Look yourself in the mirror. You're smart enough, you're good enough. I don't want to Goodwill Hunting you right now, but it's not your fault. Hey, it's not your fault. If you're watching this video quickly, you can still check out the live Chess Center show that's taking place at 5 p.m. Pacific on Monday the 28th, and see MVL join us. You can see Sasha Ipatov, Robert Hess, and some other cool clips from the press conference and such. But otherwise, the rest of you watching this the next day, I'm very sorry that I could not deliver the gusto, but this game had very, very little to offer in regards to dynamic fighting chess. So unless I was going on and on into a random Berlin video lesson, which Berlin video lectures, there's plenty over at chess.com's video library. In fact, Grandmaster Dejan Boykov did a great series on how to play the Berlin for white and black. So if you're a premium member on chess.com, go check out those videos. They are awesome. But other than doing stuff like that, there's nothing I can do, you know? I mean, Carlos Fathead made an appearance. MVL makes an appearance on Chess Center today, and as he said, I was like, you know, how you like the game? He's like, I need a drink, you know, whatever, you know. He said something about, you know, needing to forget the game. So anyway, that's life. That's life in the big, big city. The World Championship tiebreak will take place on Wednesday, November 30th, and that show and those videos are going to be phenomenal. In fact, likely game reviews of the World Chess Championship tiebreaks will be over on our sister YouTube channel, the Chess.com main YouTube channel. So this is likely the last video you will see on the Daniel Wrench YouTube channel breaking down the classical chess battles of the 2016 World Chess Championship. Thank you to all the fans who watched every video, who put something nice in the comments. Even thank you to people who put mean things in the comments. You know, all is love. And look for videos by me breaking down in a very educational way, as I did for all these games, the rapid games, over on the chess.com YouTube channel moving forward. And please subscribe. We will see you then. And again,